Hey, what's going on, guys? Dan here, Pekoe Mortgages. So, my last video, I talked about corporate profits and REITs and all that sort of stuff that was happening in the US and how we're not immune to it up here. This is just a follow up to it because there's some more information. I think we really need to get into this because corporate profit shouldn't be put above the needs of the average Canadian, and people are getting priced out of the market. And I think if you're on the sidelines and you're saying, hey, well, we're going to wait for that correction or we're going to wait for rates to go down, it might not be the best option to sit by and wait because the large corporations aren't doing that. And what they're doing is they are getting record profits off of buying houses. So let's jump into this. I wanted to share something here. This was an article with BNN. This just came out. Canada's largest apartment landlord reports record rent turnover in Q4. So what's happening here? Essentially, what's happening is that this company, Canadian Apartment Properties Real Estate, it's a REIT, reported a whopping 24.3% average rent increase on turnover. So that beat the company's previous rent turnover peak of 14.2%. So what's happening? Well, they're turning over these units and these properties that should be going to hardworking Canadians, and they're basically saying, okay, well, look, we're going to renovict rather, and they go on there, they turn it around, and they're making record profits. So they own 67,000 residential apartment suites, townhomes, and manufactured home communities across Canada. So I had some people say, well, that was in the US, your last video. This is happening here, and it's happening now. So what's this doing? Well, it's pushing up rental prices across Canada and across this province. So it's making things just simply unaffordable. And that's why I think it's so important. Like, don't let someone else be your landlord. If you can, be your own landlord, be your boss when it comes to owning a property. There are programs out there that can help us. And I'm happy to look through those with you and come up with a strategy. But let's take a look at this video right here. I think I started a little bit early.
Suites exchanged hands, and our own Paige Ellis has been tracking that story. She joins us here on Set. Hey, Paige.
Hey, John. Well, what was so interesting in the conference call that I was listening to today was that executives were performing this sort of delicate dance with listeners. They were obviously keen to highlight that they are acting, in the best interest of unit holders. They noted that when keys for suites exchange hands, there was, as one analyst put it, eye-popping increases in rent, but they're also clearly aware of the optics, and they described the housing crisis, their words. They talked about that over and over again. They know that everyone's squeezed, and so they wanted to drive home that they're good corporate citizens. But this is the number that really jumped off the page. The final figure, 24%. What does that mean? Well, when a unit exchanges hands, the increase that CapREIT saw was 24%. That is, according to two analysts whose notes I reviewed today, that is a record high.
Wow, I'm going to stop it there. It's no surprise that this cash, they call it was it cash for suites or cash for keys. We've heard this before, where essentially someone wants to come in, and this has been a long-standing practice for smaller investors where they want to renovate and get that unit out on the market and make a little bit more money on it. So they call it cash for keys, where essentially if you're renting a place, they'll say, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars if you leave. And some people take that, and then it turns out they have to get into something now. And the urgency of having that money up front, especially in this recession, it really speaks to some people. So they've been able to turn over these units and make a substantial amount of money, and it's leaving people having to pay more, quite frankly, for a place to live. So that's why I think it's so important for Canadians, the average Canadian, to get into the housing market if you haven't already, because look, corporate profits are happening. They're happening right now. Here's another, and this I wanted to really highlight here. This was one of the MPs out in Manitoba that spoke about the hazards of this with everyone's kind of turning a blind eye, and they're saying, hey, he spoke of something here, and we'll see it in a second, where he mentioned that 5%, only 5% of the units out there are owned by foreign buyers. But everyone points the finger at foreign buyers here, adding to our unaffordability in this country. And I don't think it's the case. So he highlights this, and let's go take a look at this, and then we'll circle back.
Canadians that are trying to either buy their own home or rent an affordable home, or in the case of Peggy, trying to stay in an affordable home, are all getting kicked in the teeth. And they're getting kicked in the teeth because the market has been set up not so that they can be competing with families in like situations with similar incomes, but so that Canadians that want to find their way into a home are having to compete or take on deep-pocketed corporate investors. And that's what's structurally wrong with the Canadian housing market. There are people out there that'll tell you different things about that. The Liberals so far have only been willing to take action in respect of foreign buyers, but we know they only represent about 5% of the market. Conservatives will tell you it's government spending, it's the Bank of Canada, it's anything that they can say that will cause people to look away from the real problem, which is giant corporate profits that have been made by turning what should be a market that's about people getting their family home into an asset class to make money on. And that's not something that's happened simply by accident. That's something, if you look at the history of real estate investment trusts, what you'll see is they started taking off in 1996, which, as it happens, was right after the Liberals canceled the National Housing Strategy. And they've been gaining steam since then. It doesn't serve Canadians' interest to only look at the last 2 years and what's been happening in the housing market over the last 2 years during extraordinary times. The trend line for Canadians getting pushed out of affordable homes starts much earlier than that, and it spans across Liberal and Conservative governments alike, who...
Wow. Okay, I'm going to link to the entire interview here talking about corporate investors, because I think it's definitely worth watching. But you know, he did hit on a bunch of things that I think are of concern. And we need to kind of take a look at this, because a lot of corporations are getting into the space. A lot of them that have been here for a while are making record profits. So like I said in the last one, if people scream fire and they run away, maybe turn around and see what's going on, because in this market, it could be that if this is not addressed, it's going to make the average Canadian that owns a house the minority, and corporate investors the majority when it comes to real estate. Anyway, guys, what do you think about this? Love to hear your opinion. Are you concerned about it? And if you want to see more of it, let me know.